Hi, my name is Emily Mercado. I am the Assistant Professor of Choral Music Education at the University of Utah. And tonight I'm giving a talk on intercultural religious music, policy, pedagogy, and perspective. And I want to thank Western ACDA for inviting me to be a part of this webinar series. My research interests are in intercultural religious music in public schools, and I'm excited to talk with you about this tonight. The outline for tonight's asynchronous presentation that you're listening to now is I will begin with talking about religious diversity in the United States. I'll talk about laws and policies associated with religious music, and then offer some ideas for programming intercultural perspectives of religious music. There's also a PDF associated with this talk that offers you sample objectives, discussion questions, and music examples too for programming purposes. I'll talk about how we might facilitate conversations around religious music in our classrooms, and then we'll have time for a live discussion. So please write down questions that you may have and I'm happy to answer those questions after the talk. In addition, I have some guiding questions for you that you might consider while you're listening to this talk. And those questions are, how can we program religious music from multiple perspectives? What's important for students to understand beyond the historical and cultural background of a religious piece? And how do we balance students' assigned meanings to holidays with an appropriate global view? So feel free to consider those questions, and we can talk about that at the end of this presentation. I also want to highlight some of my personal experiences. I taught middle school and high school choir in Oregon for 9 years. I didn't necessarily start considering intercultural religious music programming to the degree I do now until I began at my PhD program. So I also recognize that the context and community in which we teach really affects our programming practices and how we teach about religious music. So I want to make sure you understand where I'm coming from, and that I understand that you may not teach the same way that I do. These are just suggestions and food for thought. I like to show this map of the United States religious diversity. I like to show this because no matter what state you teach in, you will have religiously diverse students in your program. This next map shows the largest non-Christian group by state. We have a very diverse nation in terms of religion, and it's important to know and understand the community in which you teach. There is conflict and confusion that exists over teaching religious music, which is why I first got interested in learning more about this. And interestingly enough, we do know that when teachers understand laws and policies and understand, for example, the First Amendment, the more likely they are to go, okay, it is okay if I teach about religion. Although we also know that confusion exists over written and implied policies within school districts. However, there are areas where there is very little wiggle room. So, first of all, the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment states that citizens can worship freely and the government cannot impose or inhibit religion. The Lemon Test says that anything we teach in the public schools in regards to religion must have a secular purpose. You cannot advance or inhibit religion, and it must not foster excessive government entanglement with religion. So you can't, for example, go sing at a church service as part of a required concert. Religious organizations can't pay you for musical services. That would be an example of government entanglement. Also, in terms of religious music, it really needs to be tied to the curriculum for educational purposes and not religious purposes. ACDA and NAFME have also both suggested that religious music should be part of the curriculum, and they have suggested that music teachers program within the curriculum, within the context, and avoid financial entanglement. And they've also both suggested to a certain degree that we should program from multiple religious perspectives. I would say that this talk hits that a lot harder and encourages teachers that if we are going to program religious music, that we do program from an intercultural perspective, and we don't just say this is my sacred music and this is how much secular music I program. And then oftentimes what happens is the sacred music might end up becoming the dominant, whatever the majority religion of that community is. And so I'm going to talk about how to try and approach a more global view of religious music. We know that cross-cultural and intercultural experiences can be beneficial for students. They can increase their knowledge of other cultural groups and even increase positive attitudes towards other cultural groups. Researchers have suggested that these intercultural experiences might improve students' intercultural competence. But it's important that that word is loaded, intercultural competence. There's no point in which someone becomes interculturally competent. We also know researchers have found that some students desire culturally diverse experiences in their music classrooms. And students enjoy about learning other cultures around the world. However, we have to be careful because some students do not enjoy being generalized into one musical identity. And as music teachers, we also have to make sure that before we program and perform religious music from traditions with which we are unfamiliar, we have to make sure that we research the context and the background of that music and consult with a culture bearer. Because some religious music should only be sung within a specific context, such as within a sacred space or a house of worship associated with that religion. So make sure you've done your homework when you do program religious music from unfamiliar traditions. So when we do program religious music, it's important that we consider how we are going to facilitate conversations with our students. I like to use Holmes and O'Neill's peer model to facilitate conversations and understandings with my students. First, before I begin working on religious music with students, prepare them by explaining what is religious music. You can discuss what it means to sing music authentically, ask students to identify their stereotypes and assumptions, identify your own stereotypes, create a safe space for the students, and then begin to engage with religious music from different perspectives. During that process, as you engage, you can evaluate the music. As a class, learn about the social, historical, geographical elements, and ask students to share their own perceptions, how they perceive the elements affect their understanding of religions, and how that affects how they perform a piece. Consult with culture bearers. If appropriate, bring culture bearers into the rehearsal space. I encourage discussing that with an administrator and making sure that the culture bearer knows that it is a public school where you can teach about religion, but you can't promote religion. But if you focus on the musical elements and as they relate to the social, historical, geographical, economical elements within different religions and cultures, it can be a really fun learning experience for the students. And throughout this process, encourage your students to self-reflect through written group, through small group, through large group discussions. Encourage the students to communicate what they have learned and how their perspectives may have shifted as a result of learning about unfamiliar religious music. Because we're in COVID right now, I thought it would be good to talk about the online aspects of these discussions. I have done some fun online discussions this semester with my students, and we've been able to bring a lot of speakers in and a lot of experts into our classroom with Zoom. So I've done a little bit of reading about how to try and improve this social aspect online that I have been struggling to connect with students and have students connect with each other. And Garrison et al. Came out with have done a lot of research in online learning, and they use this concept of a community of inquiry. And this framework is used to analyze online learning experiences, but it's based on Dewey's constructivist approach to learning. And it serves as a lens to view indicators of our teaching presence, how teachers structure course content, facilitate discussions, answer questions. It looks at social presence, and this is mostly interactions between participants. And then cognitive presence, so the process that students work through as they move through a problem from question to resolution. And when we address all of these things in our online environment, they may lead to a more enhanced learning experience. And researchers have found that teaching presence is the driving force for successful social and cognitive learning experiences online. So it is up to us as the teachers to facilitate social experiences, to stimulate our students' thinking. And this online experience may have allowed us to take a step back and provide some space for these conversations and these discussions, and to develop our students' social and cognitive experiences in this online learning environment that we're currently engaged in. So when you plan time for these discussions in your classrooms, make sure you've considered the context and community in which you teach, and that you have developed a community of inquiry that requires sensitivity towards other perspectives. As appropriate for your community, you can ask students to share their authentic music making experiences. Ask them talk about what that means to perform music authentically. You can share feelings related to intercultural music experiences. And you can also discuss stereotypes and personal biases. Ask students if they've ever stereotyped others or have been stereotyped based on their beliefs, and how that made them feel. These sorts of conversations can make sure that students don't pigeonhole different religious musical traditions into one type of religion or one type of person, but that they understand that there are similarities and differences across religious traditions from across the world. So our last slide now is just a reminder of those questions. I'll leave these here, and now we will engage in a live synchronous discussion and questions about intercultural religious music, pedagogy, and programming. Thank you.